Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. It's such a blessing to see you all. I see folks have been wondering if the sound isn't working. Can you let me know in the chat if you can hear me? We are getting started here in one more minute. All right, I see y'all in the chat. Thanks for your patience as we get this meeting started. First, before we jump into the rest of our evening together, I want to welcome you and tell you how glad I am that you are with us tonight, that we're going to get started with our agenda shortly. But we can't get started without acknowledging that this meeting needs to be accessible to even more people than we've been able to recruit tonight. And partly what is getting us closer to being in that accessible participatory democracy is making sure that there's language justice is not just a value set, but as a practice. And so I want y'all one time to give it up for our interpretation crew. I see Benjamin's on the screen with me now. You'll see Kathy over the course of the evening. Can we show some love for our interpreters this evening who are making this call accessible to our comrades, our siblings who are fluent in ASL? And we want you to know that as you're recruiting your people to come to this call, if you need other languages interpreted, you got to let us know so we can make sure that we're getting an interpretation team in here to make sure that this call is accessible to them. I know y'all believe in language justice as much as I do. And so I want you to be as committed to making sure that that happens as we are. I also want to shout out the tech crew and the agenda planning crew and all the people that made this call possible. It would be not only a sin, but a dishonor not to name all the incredible teams of folks from organizations all across the country who have not regarded it robbery to come and hang out with us this evening. So for all of you who are participating by just coming to the mass calls, I love you. Thank you. And for everybody that's actually making these calls happen, I love you. Thank you. And see all the love that you got in the chat from the team that's here. So what are we doing here? Tonight's call is called What's the Score in America? And we're so glad that you could join us for this conversation. If you're watching on Zoom, I want you to use the chat to say hello, what's up? Tell me where you're joining in from. If you're repping an organization or a community group, feel free to shout them out. Also, I want to shout out the folks that are watching on Twitter and on YouTube as we live stream. I'm obviously going to spend some time giving some a special dose of love to people who are demanding for and watching via the recording. So if you're watching live or if you're watching later, thank you for coming and building this mass call with us. My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns, or any said respectfully. In fact, those of you who know me know my kiddo calls me Broski. I will be your hostess with the mostess this evening and over the course of our mass calls. This mass call is a space to engage in political education, to hear updates and analysis from the ground where our people are fighting for independent political power, and get involved in meaningful actions as we build power in our communities during the 2024 election cycle. I hope you are in the right place. I also just want to be straight up at the top of our call that when you fight for justice and liberation, as all of you do, there will obviously be and always be some haters. The more visible our work is, the more they come after us. Y'all know I'm a living witness. It's upsetting. And we shouldn't be surprised if, because of the vast, broad outreach that we did for this call, if there are some trolls among us this evening. I sometimes joke that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there might be a troll. So if you see any trolls in the chat, if you see any hateful messages in the Zoom chat, I want you to flood it with love and solidarity and messages that can inoculate us from the foolishness that they might try to create. We're going to be positive this evening. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean we won't disagree. There might be some areas where we're still working it out, unity, struggle, unity. But what we won't do is be harmful and hateful with one another. If you can agree with that, can you hit me with some emojis, some reactions in the Zoom? Can you hit me with some responses in the chat so I know I'm amongst my comrades this evening? All right, I see your hearts. I see your thumbs ups. I see your stars. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Now, let's get into it. Let's talk about this moment. And many of you will remember from the 2024 election cycle that we always started the mass calls that we did for the front line with a bit of grounding. And because this is our first mass call of the 2024 election cycle, we plan to do more as we continue defending members of the squad in Congress who have stood up for a ceasefire, right? We gather on these calls as we turn our attention to stopping Trump and his minions and their fascistic authoritarian threats that are challenging people, certainly here in the United States and across the globe in November, right? We're going to be the ones that save even the semblance and performance of democracy again this year. And y'all, like me, are probably coming to this call really full. You're full of grief. You're full of righteous rage. You're full of a desire to be a part of a strategic community of people that are dedicated to making this place so much better than what we've inherited. And if that's you, like me, I think we might be in the right place. And let's be real. One of the major party presidential candidates is threatening a dictatorship. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers for conspiring to manipulate an election, and he stands charged with even more crimes in 3 other jurisdictions around the country. Despite this, the Republican Party is closing ranks and fully embracing a dangerous deconstruction of even the performance of democracy in this country. Am I telling the truth? Are y'all losing sleep over this like I am? All of this is happening and some in the context of converging crises, of vast inequality, a climate crisis, a racial reckoning, followed by a racial backlash against our movements, right? We're seeing threats against folks they're freely being able to migrate in this country, right? We're seeing attacks on women, on young people, on elders. You all are feeling this, right? The war in Gaza is a genocide, a catastrophe, a human tragedy. Innocent people are being harmed, y'all. Netanyahu's government's policy of collective punishment has created a humanitarian crisis of massive proportions, and we are moving even further away from addressing the underlying and long-standing causes that got us here in the first place. In that context, it is really freaking easy to feel powerless. But it's also possible to see our people rising up, see young people building encampments on college campuses across the country, seeing our movements, absorbing people, doing political education, base building, right? It's possible to feel a sense of hope in this time when you look at Representative Summer Lee beat back the attacks against her by those who wanted to challenge her because of her stance on ceasefire. I see y'all, Pennsylvania. She won her primary in a resounding fashion, and we should be proud of the work that we did to make that possible. So, before we get started, let's take a second to just acknowledge how we feel, how we're arriving, to ground ourselves in this moment so that we can build informed strategies with optimism that is not naive, but showing us the vision forward that we've always deserved. So if you're sitting, feel free to sit. If you're standing, feel free to stand. Take things out of your hands. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your body supported. And we're going to just take 3 deep breaths together. I want you to take a big, deep breath in through your nose. Breathe in the vision that we have for beloved community, for a society where everyone belongs and everyone has what they need. And I want you to breathe out doubt and pessimism. I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose. Breathe in the blessing of responsibility that we have in this moment to build the world that we want. And I want you to breathe out doubt and anxiety and powerlessness. I want you to feel yourself supported by all of the hundreds of other people that are on this call tonight, bearing witness to our reality that none of us are free until all of us are free. And I want you to breathe in the feeling of the win of solidarity in practice. And I want you to breathe out doing the opposition's work for them by ripping each other apart in disagreement. Tonight, we have an opportunity to get clear together about what the score is. Our movement ancestors have faced their own trials before us. The details of the crises they faced were maybe different, but we know deep down in our bones that this is not the first time our people have been on this roller coaster ride. They fought and they struggled and they won, and we can do that too. Every day, I, like many of you, feel a very deep sense of grief, but I also feel joy. I feel righteous rage, but also am hopeful. I know I'm not alone, and that's why I'm happy to share space with each of you tonight. You could have been anywhere in the world, but here you are, rocking it with us. So what are these mass calls? So again, holler at me in the chat if you were around in 2020 when we were doing calls with the frontline homies as a way to bring our folks together, to get oriented to the moment, make meaning together of what was happening, point folks toward trusted leaders on the ground to get honest assessments of what was happening from their point of view, and to move forward with a stronger sense of shared strategy and collective action. This election is going to be at least as tough as that one was, right? And that might be underestimating the rise of the right. So we're going to start even earlier with the mass calls this season. So welcome. You're going to be together through the November election. These calls are being hosted by the Working Families Party. Give it up for WFP one time. It's also going to be an opportunity to highlight WFP member organizations and grassroots leaders from across the country. Tonight, you're going to hear about the great work we're doing with the Movement for Black Lives and for BL Action. You're going to hear work that's informed and influenced by Seed the Vote. You're going to hear from the incredible executive director of Showing Up for Racial Justice. And some of y'all might have seen on the promos that we're hoping to hear from a particularly special guest this evening. You might recognize his name as U.S. Congressman Jamal Bowman. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get closer to his call time. And after tonight, obviously we have more planned, right? This work isn't over just because we talked this one time for an hour on a Thursday evening. So know that we have more calls planned, and if you've registered for this call, you've probably seen the dates are already set. On June 26th, we're going to come together and talk about what it's going to require us to get Congressman Cori Bush back in her seat, because she is facing a critical all hands on deck primary challenge in Missouri. On August 14th, we're going to take stock of where we are right before the Democratic National Convention. On September 18th, we're going to prepare for the final sprint of the general election. On October 16th, we're going to keep fighting our way through and be ready for any October surprises. And then in November, we're going to gather immediately after the election and prepare for whatever is next. These fascists are going to ramp up. So we need to be coming together to not only meet them where they're at, but to exceed so that we can win. I need to know in the chat if you are down for this. Are you down for coming together with folks from all over the country to demand and to win democracy for all of our people? All right, I'm seeing some hell yes, I'm seeing some downs. For the homies that are wondering if this call is recorded, it absolutely is. So you are in the right place, and you'll be able to not only encourage other people to come and hang out with us, you also will be able to register and be available for each of these calls because we've already put the timeline out. So come and get down with us. Next part of our agenda is actually to tell you what we're going to do tonight. For folks that know me, you know I don't like asking you to enter a car and I don't tell you where we're driving to, what the destination is. So tonight we have a really powerful agenda. We're going to get a brief introduction to our political strategy for 2024. Some of y'all might have heard it. It's called Block and Build. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then you're going to quit hearing me talk and you're going to hear from grassroots leaders as they talk about what Block and Build means for their work on the ground. And then finally, we have a special guest conversation with Maurice Mitchell, the National Director of the Working Families Party. And obviously, we're looking forward to seeing the face of Representative Jamal Bowman. So that's what the call is tonight. That's where we're going. I see some folks excited about Maurice. I see some folks excited about Block and Build, and we are equally as excited to be learning from and with each of you who are actually moving this political strategy on the ground. Before we get into our political education intervention for tonight, though, y'all know I don't get down with education for education's sake only, right? If education for education's sake worked, we would have smarter people and smarter people would save the world. And that is yet to happen without some more action, right? And so the goal tonight is to make sure that you also know what your marching orders are leaving this call. And if you haven't already, we need you to text mass call, 2 words, mass call to 30403 so that we can stay connected. We can talk to you in between the calls, right? So take your phone out right now, text the word mass call, words mass call, 2 words, to 30403. By texting, we'll connect you with concrete ways that you can help Representative Jamal Bowman right now, and who we will hopefully be hearing from later tonight. And then by texting mass call to 30403, we'll also be able to connect you with ways that you can evangelize about these calls and the work that's coming out of it. You'll be able to spread the word about the next mass calls so that we can watch our movement grow together. And then, we've won infinite amounts of things by harnessing our collective power. We also know there's so much more that we need and deserve and likely will have to fight for if we're going to get it. So we're going to continue coming together and winning our freedom dreams together. We're going to continue to take care of each other tonight and beyond these mass calls. I think we're ready to get into it. Can you tell me you're ready to get into it into the chat so we can start talking about Block and Build? I'm ready to get into it with you. All right, we're ready. Let's do this. So we've got some slides, and I'm going to take us through our teaching tonight. To win, we need a strategy. Tonight, we're going to start to dig into a political strategy that we've been lovingly calling Block and Build. You may have heard of Block and Build from Buddhist Peace Fellowship back in the early 2020s. You may have heard about it from reading Max Elbaum and the homies that have been working with Convergence. You might have heard about it through WFP or any number of other of our sister organizations. So this is a political strategy. It's about blocking our opponents and all the ways that they try to stop our progress while building our own power and alternatives. And here's a spoiler alert. We need to play the long game. This strategy is not about one election cycle. It's not about one candidate, no matter how much we might love or hate any of them. But this political strategy does give us practical insights about what we need to do right now. in this election cycle. So let's dig in. We're going to start with the idea of block. In future calls, we'll get more into build, and we know that for many of you, build is like actually where you're itching to talk about strategy. But right now, we've got to build a shared foundation of what we're up against. And you might be thinking, I already know that, which maybe you or I do. But there is also more to dig below the surface a bit. And that's what we're going to do right now. Let's start by talking about MAGA. Now, listen, I don't want any of y'all stuck up, not being able to sleep tonight, but we've got to talk about our opposition. This that we're seeing is the latest manifestation of a 60-year backlash against the gains of our movements, right? Workers' rights movements, Black liberation, racial justice, civil rights movements, for women and LGBTQ communities, for the environment, for redistributive justice, and so much more. MAGA's white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchal Christian nationalism is not just a US phenomenon. It's a part of a global rise in authoritarianism. And there's a lot that's distilled into MAGA, right? It has its roots in so many other right-wing forces. This didn't just happen overnight, right? If we were looking at the distillation, we can look at MAGA and see its connection to Nixon's Southern strategy, to Reagan's neoliberal attacks on regulations and public spending, to Gingrich's rule or ruin and contract with America, the bipartisan war on drugs and mass incarceration crisis, also known as the new Jim Crow, the never-ending racialized war on terror and xenophobic interventions, right? Fallout from the 2008 financial crisis, birtherism, and certainly, and I see all my Southern family in the chat, the Tea Party movement, right? All of these things, all of these elements tap into deep patterns of backlash against progressive and leftist gains, especially for people of color, for women, and for the LGBTQ plus community. The growing backlash also coincided with the rises and failures of neoliberalism. Can I get an amen that neoliberalism has failed? It is not working for our people. As the failures of neoliberal rule became even more evident, the establishment is discredited, and many people who feel abandoned by our movements are turning to the right. So it's important here to hold two ideas in our heads at the same time. First, this stuff is rooted in our history, all of us. And there's always been a backlash against the gains that we've made in our social movements and our movements for economic and environmental justice. And second, the threat of MAGA is considerably more dangerous than what we've seen before in most of our lifetimes, certainly in mine. There is a fundamental breakdown in the existing order, and the MAGA movement feels like they are in an existential fight for their way of life, which is bringing out their most extreme tendencies. This is what it looks like. MAGA politicians are already boasting about plans for authoritarian rule. Y'all seen Project 2025? They're not even lying about it. They're not keeping it covert. MAGA already controls 23 state legislatures and the House of Representatives. They control the Supreme Court. MAGA contains an openly white supremacist current that uses political violence to achieve its ends. If MAGA gains full power, they already have plans drawn up to bring every federal agency directly under the presidential's control. You might know what that sounds like. It sounds like a dictatorship, right? They're going to turn the Justice Department into his political police. They're going to make the Environmental Protection Agency a tool of the fossil fuel industry. They're going to recast the National Labor Relations Board as a union-busting weapon if it survives at all. They're going to codify a national abortion ban. They're going to increase attacks on LGBTQ plus people. They're going to further shred the social safety net and define benefits as only for deserving citizens. They're going to impose Southern-style, Florida-style book banning, and they're going to suppress the true histories of struggles against white supremacy and structural racism that many of us have spent our life trying to build. In case you think I'm exaggerating, here's your homework assignment for later. I want you to go to MediaMatters.org, and I want you to see their guide on Project 2025. You'll be terrified at what the MAGA forces are planning. In 2020, an anti-MAGA majority began to emerge. Y'all remember, y'all were there. Y'all were part of it. The front against MAGA is made up by lots of folks, but for the sake of this intervention, we're going to talk about them in three categories. One, they're centrist Democrats. Two, there are the anti-MAGA conservatives, right? Folks that are conservative, but at least they don't want fascism, right? And three, the rising left and progressive movement. So our basis for being in this united front together is our shared strategic objective. We got to defeat MAGA, point blank, period. The centrist Democrats and the anti-MAGA conservatives are in the lead for now, but they can't defeat MAGA on their own, right? They need us. And we've needed them to beat back this attack before too. Certainly in 2020, that was a material truth, right? So while we're working inside to build our power and to build this united front, so our power within the united front and to build the united front itself, again, we've got to work to eventually lead it. We have to. It is our responsibility and obligation. We'll talk more about what that looks like on future calls, but in short, our movement must keep growing in our sophistication to know when to struggle with centrist and conservative forces in the broad united front. That might look like running primaries against corporate Democrats. We need to know when to unite with this front to do things like codify Roe v. Wade, or get something even more radical than that, or to defeat a MAGA candidate, right? There's all sorts of reasons why we need to be sophisticated in this moment. So, want to check, does that sound right so far? Does it feel clear to you? Because here's the thing, as we all know, it's certainly not as simple as I just made it sound, y'all. It's hard work. Sometimes it's uncomfortable work. One of the reasons for that is that elections can really suck. In our two-party system, they can force some really bad either or choices, binaries onto us that we have spent, again, our life's work trying to dismantle. This leads us to the idea of the November contradiction. Calling it the November contradiction is just another way of saying that in the two-party system that we are forced to work within, we're faced with similar dynamics every single election year. I know y'all know it because many of y'all complained to me about it, about how the cyclical nature of this contradiction. And in the primaries, a lot of people get their hopes up that we're going to see some change. And then the general election comes around, we feel like we have to settle for the lesser of two evils or worse, right? We're not saying this because we agree with it, right? We think it's not necessarily the most ideal state of affairs, right? No one would argue that this is our utopian vision for what we deserve. But rather to the point, it's structural. It's working exactly as it was designed to, in ways that disenfranchise and rule out our people's participation. It's a dynamic built into the system. It's particularly bad this year. We're feeling real pain about the genocide in Gaza, over immigration, over the state of the Democratic Party's response to our issues in general and in totality. And a lot of people are going to feel a sense of whiplash when we have to pivot from doing the work of defending the squad or rejecting AIPAC to the work of grinding it out as a part of a united front strategy for the general elections. Trust me, I know. But we can't resort to the rhetoric of the Democratic Party to help people make sense of this feeling of whiplash either. We can't go down the path of simplifying folks' necessary participation because it's the most important election of our lives. How many people have heard it already this cycle, right? That you have to participate because it's the most important election of our lives, right? I've heard it. I know you have. What we do need to do is name the totality of the problem. Finish the sentence. And in the effect it has on our communities and movements, we've got to be honest about it. We've got to name our plan and our commitment to do the work to build power beyond the intervention of elections. Can I get an amen? Somebody. We need to give people a reason to feel hopeful that we are building something of our own, for our own, something different, y'all. And not just in this election, but in general. Our movements are navigating really tough political terrain. This next slide is a picture of just what some of that terrain looks like. This is a picture of the current political crisis in America. Depending on where you live in the United States, some parts of the crisis are going to look more prominent than others. If you live in a blue state, you're probably dealing with number two a little bit more, that much of the Democratic Party is controlled by corporate forces and caters to affluent voters. If you, like me, live in a red state, the number one is going to be much more real. You're seeing the authoritarian takeover of the Republican Party up close and in real time, right? In fact, you're probably a couple of generations in to living out the consequences of the takeover of the far right, right? But none of these are disconnected phenomena. In fact, they all represent a four-headed dragon of sorts. So let's come back to where we started from. We need a strategy. We kind of desperately do. And at the Working Families Party, we're building a political party, so it may surprise you to hear that we don't think elections are all that in a bag of chips. You're not going to hear from WFP that elections are the end-all be-all. What you will hear is that we are competing on electoral terrain and in a political system that has been shaped by centuries of inequality and exclusion. Think you agree there. And here's the thing. Elections are a tactic. Building our own party is a tool we're using to exploit this tactic even more effectively. Elections and party building can, and in fact should, exist in an ecosystem of other tactics. When my elders and ancestors said by any means necessary, they meant by all the means up to and including elections and party building. For my rads on the call, you all might be remembering the Black Panther Party, right? So elections open a door, but they're not the destination. And at WFP, the destination we are pursuing is the power to actually govern, not sit on the sidelines or even be given a seat at somebody else's table. We want to run the table. We trying to govern. Think you, like me, are trying to be in power with our people, right? We're setting and executing agendas. That's all we're going to have time to go into tonight. I know it's a tease, but I just want to preview some of the political education that we're going to do on some of the future calls. We know that folks are really stuck in thinking about converging crises and the contradictions that these converging crises are making real for our people on the ground, what this means for the political moment that we find ourselves in. So we're going to talk about that on future calls. And we want to talk about how Trump and MAGA are exploiting this political moment to build their own movement, right? They're opportunistic. And of course, in future calls, we're going to get into exactly what is it we are building, right? Everybody wants to talk about build. I certainly do. So stay tuned and come back for the next calls. Now, I've talked to you and at you for far too long. I see y'all in the chat. Y'all been talking to me too, and I appreciate you. Of course, I want to hear from you now. So we're going to put up a poll, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear if you feel convinced that we need to block the GOP. Are you sold on the fact that somebody's got to block the right? Might that be you? And are you already blocking MAGA? Some of y'all might already be doing this work. So I want you to also tell me how you're doing it. Put in the chat if there are websites that we can look at, if there are campaigns we can support. If you are blocking the right already, we want to know that. We want to be able to amplify and support the incredible life-saving work that you're doing on the ground. So take a second. I want you to fill this out. How convinced are you that we need to block MAGA, block the GOP? And are you already blocking the GOP? Are you already doing the work to defeat MAGA? And if so, I want you to holla at us in the chat. For the homies, I see you. I see you. Yes, you're blocking. Yes, you agree. I see the homies in Oregon. Shout out to the Pacific Northwest. I see you. I see the dangerous homosexuals of the South that are saying, yes, we are blocking the right. I see you. I see your let's goes. I see your amens. We got about 40% of you all participating in the poll. I'm going to encourage a few more folks to fill out the poll. Do you feel convinced? And do you already do the life-saving work of blocking MAGA, blocking the GOP? All right, Texas, I see you. I see you. All right. I think we give it maybe another 10, 15 seconds for the sake of time. Y'all killing it in the chat. I love you. Yes, absolutely. Block the GOP. Let's do this. All right, y'all. What I'm hearing from the back of the house, shout out again to the tech team, is that we got about 69% responses. And of that 69%, 91% of you chose number 5, that you feel highly aligned that you feel ready to go to block the GOP. That means we're doing something right. And for those of you that aren't convinced yet, don't sweat it, man. You are still exactly in the right space, because if I can't organize you to be down, then I'm not doing my job. So we are going to stay in conversation to move everybody to a 5. And I bet that if I can get to a place where we all hear about what the block strategy is and what the build side of the strategy is, that we will get together and be able to save even the semblance of democracy in this country. Are you with me? All right. All right. I'm seeing hearts. We're ready to go. All right. Before we jump into the rest of the agenda, I also just, again, want to remind you of our calls to action here tonight. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on the future calls that I sort of foreshadowed earlier, and ways that you can take specific actions to support this movement and help this movement grow by inviting more and more of your people to come and join us on these calls, I need you to get your phone out. I need you to open your text messages. I need you to text mass call, 2 words, mass call, MASS space CALL to 30403. Please text mass call to 30403 and spread the word about these upcoming calls. Now, I have the blessed privilege of bringing some of the smartest, incredible, most principled, just genius human beings that I've ever had the honor of getting to share space with and build movements with. We're going to hear from 3 grassroots leaders who are organizing to make our block and build strategy real on the ground. The first person I get to bring up is not only a dear friend and sister, but a person that I am proud to follow. Her leadership is immeasurable. She's the co-coordinator of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. I need y'all to give it up one time for Rukia Lumumba the Great. Y'all can do better than that. Give me some love for Rukia Lumumba. Next, I have the honor of introducing to some and bringing back to many someone who threw down really hard on much of the frontline conversations that we had 4 years ago, so her face will be familiar. I'm bringing up Erin Heaney, who is the director of Showing Up for Racial Justice and who is also a member of the incredible National Committee of the Working Families Party. Y'all give it up for Erin Heaney. And last but certainly not least, I want to thank Anna Maria Arquilla, the co-director of the New York Working Families Party, who is a leader in the fight to fend off the attacks on Representative Jamal Bowman. She can give us the view from the ground there. First of all, comrades, I want to thank each of you for not regarding it robbery to spend this evening with us. And I want to, over the course of this conversation, ask all of you to reflect on this political strategy of block and build and to share what's coming up for you from your perspective of doing the work on the ground, right? What are the challenges that you're facing and how is it working? Rukia, I want to start with you, my love. Tell me more about why we need to block and build from your perspective. And what would be the harms of blocking without building or building without blocking?
So one, just thank you, Ash. Always, it's so good to always be in community with you and doing this work with you and everyone on this call. Shout out to everyone who is joining right now. We appreciate you spending your night with us, and appreciate even more how you're going to share the information and take hold of the language that is necessary to move our people to the polls. So I'm Rukia Lumumba with the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. And, very clearly, we must block because our futures demand it, right? We block because of a few things. One, I think you laid it out pretty clear, Ash, around blocking because the Project 2025 is a white manifesto, which will kill any semblance of democracy for our people. We block also because we are attempting to help Black people build local power in their communities, to improve the quality of life, right? To dismantle systems that are and have been harmful to our ability to live healthy, safe, and joyous lives, right? We are confident that through building that power and setting our agendas, that we will achieve the liberatory futures that we deserve and that we need. And so we block because we must continue to be disruptive. We must continue to be a disruptive political force outside of traditional political arena. And that means no business as usual as Black people, because we suffer every day. And so we pledge, as you said, we pledge no allegiance to any particular party. We pledge allegiance to our people. And in order to pledge allegiance to our people, we must do the act that requires us to block those that are trying to prevent us from living our best lives. And so we block because there are legislators, there are organizations, there are billionaires, there are so many folks that are trying to prevent Black people from moving in a way in which we can have and live the best life possible. So we block for that reason. We block to create better conditions to demand and realize, the electoral expansions and the right to vote for all people, including formerly incarcerated and presently incarcerated and undocumented people. We block so that we can continue to fight for comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care and the elimination of discriminatory barriers to health care for all people. We block because our climate demands are real, right? And so we have a right to restored land, to clean air, to clean water, to housing, and an end to the exploitative privatization of natural resources. Come on, across this nation, even in my home state of Mississippi, we have experienced the harms of how we lack to take care of our water systems. And we saw just in Atlanta where they had a water crisis similar to what we have currently every day in Mississippi and Jackson. So we also block so that we can leverage the recent and continued momentum around reparations, right? We're getting closer and closer, and we block for that. So why do we build, right? We build, and I know others got to go, so I'm gonna try to make it quick, but we build because we want to create those conditions to realize our political strategy. And our political strategy has to be around demilitarization as a pathway to abolition. We know that one. We also build because we believe that co-governance is critical for a true democracy. And so we have to create the opportunity for community to be fully engaged in making big and small decisions. And we can only do that when we have conditions that allow us to do that. We build because we believe in establishing dual power and competing power. And so that building that dual and competing power, we understand that that is a strategy that contests for state power through the capture of infrastructure that increases our legitimacy on the left to govern by meeting the direct material needs of our people, right? We fight for this dual and competing power because we believe that it is critical to build critical infrastructure under the people's control that adds to our capacity for people to resist. And that forces the state into concessions through the campaigns, infrastructure, and economic campaigns. And so, we believe that block and build is critical to our people's ability to exercise their agency, to architect robust systems change and what is needed to build a new institutional power that paves the way for a more just system rooted in restoration, resiliency, and self-determination. So we block and we build.
We block and we build. We block and we build. Rukia taking us to Movement Church this evening. That's where you shout, is that we block and we build. She tried to tell you something. Y'all missed it. I'm gonna give you one more opportunity in the chat. We block and we build. Aaron Heaney, homie, come into the chat here with us tonight. Our little fireside conversation in front of a few hundred people here in Zoomlandia, on Twitter and on YouTube. I want you to just bring us into a conversation about what your work to block and build looks like. And I want to fold in a question that we got from the chat that was like, what's the difference between block and get out the vote, right? What's the difference between build and get out the vote? Like, what does that have to do with the block and build political strategy? So tell me in general what it looks like on the ground for you. What are the opportunities, the challenges, and what's the difference between like block and build and GOTV?
Awesome. So good to be with you all tonight. Ash, thanks for the question, and for all the folks who've gathered with us here tonight. So y'all, Surge, this is our work. This is our bread and butter. We work to undermine the power of the right and then bring more white communities into multiracial fights for racial and economic justice, right? Our lane is the white people, right? Because we understand that white supremacy and racism is one of the most powerful tools that people in power have to undermine multiracial solidarity. People in power are scared shitless of it. Pardon my pardon. You know, we understand that white supremacy rearranges the solidarity of white people away from working class communities of color, and toward white racial solidarity. And this undermines our movements, and it isn't good for white people either, right? So we take our blocking responsibility really seriously. That's our movement, right? Our lane is to block the right from capturing more power and to block them from recruiting and radicalizing more of our people, more of my people, right? And then to bring more white folks who are with us into active support and actually, beyond just, as you said earlier, Ash, like the learning and into active action, right? To actually realize the world that we're all fighting for. So, some of what this looks like, we're thrown down really hard on the electoral front this year. Just 2 weeks ago, some of us were part of a big, broad coalition that helped deliver a really big win for Representative Summer Lee, right? Surge was part of a big coalition with Working Families Party, See the Vote, Movement for Black Lives, a whole crew of us. So shout yourselves out in the chat if you were someone that made a phone call, knocked a door, made a donation. Representative Lee was being targeted by MAGA, right, by these forces, Ash, that you've laid out because of her position, her stance on ceasefire, on alternatives to policing, our entire agenda, right? And she ended up winning by a landslide. This is huge for our movements, right, y'all? Surge had a huge impact in this race. Alongside our comrades, we went into white working class neighborhoods and we knocked 6,000 doors. 500 of our members knocked 6,000 doors. We made 160,000 calls and we had 12,000 conversations with white working class voters who we know are going to benefit from the vision that Summer Lee, Representative Lee, and our movements are fighting for. But we also knew that MAGA forces are going after these same folks. And so we went in and talked to voters directly about how our vision, our movement's vision, is better for our folks, not the MAGA forces who are so often talking to them. So, I think this win, powered by our movement, shows that progressive candidates who are aligned with movement positions can win, right, and get us closer to this co-governance that Rukio was talking about, right? It shows the power of the multiracial working class to block MAGA, the MAGA movement, MAGA donors, from winning. And it sent a message to the Democratic Party that, as Representative Lee said, that being against genocide is good policy and good politics, right? That's a winning strategy, right? And so, we're so proud to be working alongside our comrades that are on the call tonight, to help elect Representative Jamal Bowman as our next fight in the squad defense. So we're thrilled to be doing that and taking responsibility for white voters in that district as well, right? And as Ash said, the white Christian nationalist movement is poised to capture the federal government, right? And at Surge, as the largest group in the US right now, explicitly organizing white people against white supremacy, we think we've got a really unique and important responsibility to play in stopping that, right? We have to block MAGA forces from capturing the federal government, because if we don't, as many people have said, the results are going to be just devastating. So Surge this year is taking responsibility for a universe of 12 million white voters in 6 swing states, right? These are white voters that we know MAGA forces are also going to be going after and really could go one way or the other. And so we're knocking doors, calling them, texting them, doing a lot of that good old fashioned get out the vote work that's not very glamorous, but is the person-to-person work that is required to get people to the polls, to do some of the most unglamorous but really important work to create the conditions that Rukio was talking about, and to be able to advance our demands and move us all here on this call tonight fighting for, right? For us, I think that for too long, white communities have let communities of color save us, right? We'd like to thank Black women and thank Blacks. And that's actually not a viable strategy, because the reality is our opposition is going after, our base, our folks, for me, my folks, white working class folks. And the reality is their base is overwhelmingly white. So we need to take responsibility for organizing our folks into the multiracial Black-led coalition that we need to win. And so that's part of why we engage in electoral work and why we're proud members of the Working Families Party, and in it for the long haul with the Movement for Black Lives, See the Vote, and so many other comrades across the movement. So we hope more folks will join us in this work. And that's some of what our Block and Build is looking like this year, Ash.
Man, Aaron, thank you. I just want to remind folks, if you haven't seen the great news coming out of the M4BL camp in relationship to what Aaron was forecasting that we've done, M4BL Action and WF Power is going to be doing a block and build training in the Bronx. And then there's going to be some opportunities for folks to volunteer doing Get Out the Vote GOTV work for Congressman Jamal Bowman. So if you want more information, guess what you probably better do? You better text mass call to your 303. Oh no, let me not fuck up the damn number. 30403. 30403. Text mass call to that number. We'll tell you how to get involved. Anna Maria, I mean, first of all, just thank you. We owe you a thank you. Thank you for all the ways that you have before, during, and after 2024 shown up and fighting in accountable relationships to our people. It is an honor to be with you on this call and in this work with you. I mean, you've been a tip of the spear kind of WFPer in New York, and now you all as a state under your leadership are taking a major role in blocking the GOP from getting this federal trifecta, right? And building power for working families by sending WFP champions to the halls of power, not just on the federal level, but up and down the ballot, right? Can you tell us more as people are planning to throw down either monetary support or phone bank or text message or come to New York and hit the pavement and knock the doors for Jamal? Tell us more about what's going on in New York. And why does it matter to folks? Why should it matter to folks across the nation that y'all are fighting for Jamal's seat and to get him back into Congress? Like, why should the country care and support this effort?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ash and Rukia and Erin, for laying out such a beautiful, powerful vision, charging all of us with like just a recognition that we are agents in our country's history and in our lives, and that it is that we are living in a moment in history that is calling us to lean into a vision of the world that we want to build. I'm going to get to your question, but I want to address the question of like that someone put in the chat about is blog about Get Out the Vote. I actually think that every conversation that we have with a voter, especially in the communities that have for the entirety of these countries' history been left to the margins and forgotten. Immigrant communities, Black and Brown communities, working class communities. Every time we show up, we invite someone to remember that they too are agents in their own history. And so I see every conversation as a build, as an opportunity to bring people into a sense of their power, into a political community, into a vision for the country we deserve, for the lives they deserve. And so that's how I think about electoral work. It's a million opportunities to build and build and build. And right now in New York, we are the epicenter of the fight to defend the squad. Jamal Bowman came into office in 2020 as someone who was from outside of the political establishment. He was a teacher, an educator in the Bronx, had spent his entire adult life teaching children in the Bronx and supporting the families in the Bronx, the poorest county in the country. And he was sick and tired of seeing these same children and these same families disinvested, criminalized, abused, exploited, and excluded. And he said, no more, no more, I'm throwing my hat in. And so he, from the beginning, was someone that questioned the logic of our political system that tells our communities to wait, to sit back. That one day we will have housing. One day we will have good schools. One day we will have real safety. One day in the future, and that future never comes. And he said, I'm sick and tired. And so from the beginning, he made sort of the political establishment, the neoliberal forces inside the Democratic Party really mad. And that has been his everyday ever since 2020. And so right now, the MAGA forces are trying to not just win with or retake the White House and continue to control Congress, but they're trying to erase all the gains that we have made. They're trying to erase our political gains, and that's why they're trying to take out Jamal Bowman from Congress. AIPAC, which is the organization that is being really at the sort of front of the spear to defeat the squad, has spent In the last 2 weeks, almost $10 million against Jamal Bowman. So it's a huge, huge fight. But we know, we know that against big money, what we have is solidarity, radical solidarity, the willingness and the commitment to show up. So I want to invite everyone to visit Jamal Bowman's webpage, to go to the Working Families Party webpage and sign up for a phone bank, sign up for a door knocking shift, sign up, sign up, sign up. Now, we will protect Jamal. And then the day after the primary, we will turn our attention to the task at hand in New York. In 2022, the Republicans gained 5 new seats in Congress. And why? Why did the red wave come through New York and it didn't come through the rest of the country? Because in New York, the political crisis about the Democratic Party really being controlled by the corporate forces and the 1% is very real. And people in New York are sick and tired of not being able to afford housing, not being able to just have the basic things that they need to live close to their families and their communities. And so people are looking for a way, a solution to their immediate crisis. And some of them are going to the right wing for that solution. So the Republican Party, controlled by MAGA, swept through New York in 2022 and took 5 congressional seats. And that is why today we have MAGA controlling Congress. So we at the Working Families Party take very seriously our responsibility to take back those seats, not because we're in love with the candidates, we are not, but because we see it as our duty to protect our people. And that is one thing that we are doing. We're blocking MAGA. We're creating the opportunity for AOC, for Jamal Bowman, for Summer Lee, for Ilhan Omar, for Rashida to be in the majority in Congress so that they can not only protect our rights, but actually expand what is possible. But we are also doing things like trying to change our constitution in New York. We have a very important ballot initiative that will enshrine new rights, not just the right to an abortion, but will enshrine protections for LGBTQ people, for immigrants, for elderly people, for people who live with disabilities into our constitution. Those protections don't exist. Even though we live in a blue state, it's a blue state that actually has been controlled by sort of the corporate forces in our democracy and in our politics. So that is some of how we are thinking about Block and Build in New York. We are protecting our brother Jamal, our champion, and we are making sure that we immediately turn our attention to blocking the forces of MAGA in Congress. And at the same time, and in the same conversation at the door, reminding people that we have an opportunity to enshrine new rights into our constitution. Block and build all the time.
Block and build all the time, every day. That's what time it is on the clock of U.S. politics, y'all. Blocking, we're building. Yo, I want to thank these incredible leaders, and I want you all to join me in sending some love, some best wishes, making some commitments to solidarity to these incredible humans, my friends, my comrades, my sister girls, the people that I call when I'm trying to figure out strategy. They just told us that what time it is for political strategy is block and build. And there's obviously so much more we can learn from these 3 powerful leaders who are doing work right now to organize around block and build strategy. But we're going to have to switch gears. So give it one more shot at giving some love to our incredible panelists tonight. You know, I just want to say real quick before I introduce, like, honestly, the one of the men of the hour, is that I see people in the chat talking about places where they live, where the right wing, where MAGA forces have already taken over. I see you. Y'all know I empathize. I'm from Tennessee. We got a right wing, like a far right MAGA trifecta, right? I see you. But now's the time not just to complain about the ways that they've taken over. Not that that's what y'all are doing in the chat. It's not what's happening. But for those of us that live in those places, we've got to fight like hell to get our power back, our governing power back. And one of the ways to do that is by joining the Working Families Party. We got to get to the business of organizing. We got to get serious about block and build. And why what Anna Maria told us is really important. Why what Aaron and Rukia told us about New York and Pennsylvania, what we're going to talk about in future calls about Missouri and others are important is because we got to keep what's purple and leaning blue, moving blue. We've got to keep what's solidly blue, blue for the protection of all of our folks. Y'all know about preemption. We live it, right? And for those of us that are in far right states, we've got to organize like lives depend on it. And one of the ways I think we could do that is by building the Working Families Party. Let me tell you one of the reasons why I'm convinced about that. It's because back in 2014, I met this guy. He'd been supporting folks that were protesting in Ferguson. And I also had heard that he was a pretty incredible organizer. He had been throwing down in DC because he was a HU grad, all these things about this really cool guy named Mo. I didn't know him from Adam. But I got invited to a meeting that would lead to the development of a thing called the Movement for Black Lives. And then I found out years later that the reason I got to go is because he put my plane ticket on his credit card, a credit card that I think I just found out over the weekend he might have only just paid off because he had been supporting so many of us. I get to bring up a person whose leadership I believe in to my toenails, who I have seen practice principled struggle, who I've seen create visionary strategies that changed people's material conditions. Mo Mitchell doesn't just talk about it, he bees about it, y'all. And when he decided, because of movement intervention, that he would take the assignment of building us a viable alternative party, not one that just espouses values, but doesn't actually put in the resources to build power. But I'm talking about actually doing the work. A man whose feet are grounded, but whose head is in eternal optimism for what our people deserve. We have a party leader like that, y'all. A party leader who has walked what he talks. So without further ado, I get to invite to the stage Maurice Mitchell. And Maurice Mitchell is going to bring our special guest of the hour, Congressman Jamal Bowman. Mo, I'm tossing it to you.
Oh, Ashley, thank you for that generous introduction. So much love to you, my sibling, my comrade, my sister. I will follow you through the fires for our people. Thank you so much for all of your work, all of your partnership, all of your love. Thank you for holding us through this conversation about blocking and building. And Ashley, so you got to introduce me. I got you one up. Because I get to introduce somebody who is a brother of mine, somebody who I met him on the campaign trail when he was just known as an activist and an educator and a principal. And I remember his uncommon journey into Congress. And at that time, there were people who couldn't see the vision. There were people who doubted it was possible. There were people who didn't believe that everyday people who are rooted in our communities can make it to the highest level of the federal government. And so I can't tell you how incredibly proud I am to throw down with my brother, Representative Jamal Bowman. He is a fighter, and he has given his voice, he has given his time, he has given his energy, he has given his life to our people, and he's become one of the leading voices inside of the Democratic Party. He is a working families Democrat, right? He is a working families Democrat. That means he stands up for working families everywhere. He represents the people in the Bronx, but he represents the people of this country that believe in freedom. And he understands what's at stake. He understands why it's so important that we block the far right and that we have to build the future on our terms. And we know that coming up in just a few weeks, on June 25th, the people in the Bronx are going to have to make a critical decision. So Representative Bowman, my brother Jamal, welcome. Welcome, 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 welcome. And I can see you're campaigning right now because you're in the back of a car from somewhere. So this brother's always working for the people. How you doing, Jamal?
I'm doing great, brother. Peace and love to you, Maurice. Good to see you. Good to be with you. What's up, WFP family? Shout out to all of you. Thank you so much for allowing me to jump on this call and say a few words. Thank you so much for your relentless, urgent, unyielding support of me in the very beginning of this campaign, but your support of me since 2019. When you didn't have to support, you didn't have to believe, you didn't have to help me fundraise, you didn't have to do those things. So I'm so grateful and appreciative to all of you, and to have WFP be under the leadership of Maurice, and New York used to be under the leadership of Sochi. Now it's under the leadership of Anna Marie and Jasmine. I mean, we have incredible organizers, brilliant minds, people who have deep love and passion for our communities, running the Working Families Party. So I'm just grateful to be a part of that. You know, Maurice, you said we're a few days away. We're actually a few weeks away. We're actually 9 days from early voting, y'all. 9 days from early voting. So it is right here. The time is now. And we are doing everything we can to make sure we win re-election during this tumultuous time in our district, in our country, in the Middle East, on the continent of Africa, and all around the world. Fascism's on the rise. We have a genocide taking place in Gaza right now and in Sudan. We still have kids getting shot and killed here in Mount Vernon, in the Bronx, and Yonkers. Working people are still struggling, man. I was just in Co-op City meeting with building in Section 5, and people who work their entire lives, man, paying taxes, paying their Social Security. They can't afford their rent, man. They can't afford their rent. They can't afford groceries. And then what makes it even worse, Brother Maurice, is, you know, they are doing everything they can to jump through all the hoops to get a little bit of reprieve, and they can't even get no reprieve, man. It's just, the struggle is real out here. And so we need to make sure Congress works for the people, the working class people. We need to make sure that state houses, county houses, city governments work for the people. You know, my opponent is a lifelong Democrat, so-called. He literally sold his soul to AIPAC. He sold his soul to MAGA Republicans. And he is the #1 recipient of AIPAC money in the country this cycle. And AIPAC is spending money in this. And why? Because we free Medicare for all. Housing is a human right. A Green New Deal. Working people, right? The right to organize, fully funding NLRB, ending gun violence, all of the things that we should be doing as elected member of Congress. That's what we're fighting for. And of course, we're fighting to end the mass collective punishment that's going on in Gaza. And so we are 9 days away. We just had a record-breaking fundraising month, Maurice. We raised $1 million in the month of May, yo. That's triple what we raised in April. I knew you would be proud of that, Maurice, so I wanted to say that number. But we were able to do that because of the organizing that's been done by WFP and all of our coalition partners, and just people of humanity and justice all around the country rising up and supporting us, man. And I'll close with this. This race is not about me. It's about us. It's about what we all stand for, what we all represent, what we've been organizing for, what we've been fighting for, and our deep belief in our collective humanity and our deep belief in justice. This humanity is our collective liberation and our collective self-actualization. That is what this race is about, versus big money, special interests, and power continuing to control politics. And so we got a great game plan, y'all. Please continue to plug in and help us out in any way that you can. We need you. We love you. God bless you. And let's go to work and let's win this race, y'all.
All right. We love you back, Jamal. We love our fighters, and we're gonna fight. We're gonna flank you and fight every way, every inch until we get to the finish line with you. Thank you so much, my brother. We appreciate you for taking the time, the time that you have to get off the campaign trail to be with all of us and be in conversation with us. And we look forward to the next couple of weeks, the days where we're going to fight every inch that we can. We're going to have conversations with every voter that we can in Westchester and the Bronx to take your campaign across that finish line. Now I'm going to hand it back to Ashley. Thank you, Brother Jamal. We appreciate you. And Ashley's going to bring us home and give us our marching orders. Ash.
Y'all, I see the love you're giving to Mo and the representative. Y'all can do better than that. We not only believe that we will win, we know that we will win, right? We know that when we organize, when we hit the doors, when we phone bank, when we give our little 10 cents, whatever you've got, that every little bit counts. We will win this race. We will win this race. Do you have the bold and contagious audacity to believe that we will see Jamal Bowman back to Congress? It will be Jamal, it will be Corey, it will be AOC, it will be Rashida and Ilhan, it will be the squad and some. That the work that we have to do beyond November, we are committed to. The work that we have to do to build a viable third party with WFP, we will do. The work to build healthy, engaging social movements that aren't only training people to be good fighters, but helping them and supporting them to be good winners. That's what we're about on these mass calls. So if you believe in that and you can see Jamal Bowman to victory and you are willing to put your practice into play starting today, I need to hear you and see you in the chat. If you are on Twitter, you are not excused. I mean you too. For the folks that are watching the recording, I am talking to you. For our comrades who are paying attention to what's happening because you're watching the stream on YouTube, we all have to get down. Thousands of us have to participate. It is our time. So give it up one more time in solidarity, love, and gratitude to Maurice Mitchell and Representative Jamal Bowman. The call is just about wrapping up, but before we do, I want to tell you again what we need. And what we need is you in this fight. We need you to show up. We need you to show out for Jamal Bowman over the next 9 days, the next 2.5 weeks. If you are ready to join us, I need you to text mass call to 30403. Between now and June 26th, which is our next call, you're most certainly going to have an hour or two of time. I know, because some of the busiest people I know are taking an hour or two of their time to make sure that we support Jamal Bowman. So if you've got an hour or two that you were going to spend just Netflix and chilling, I need you to dedicate that time to Jamal Bowman. If you've got a few extra bucks that you were maybe going to spend on that IPA or whatever is your dance, I need you to give that couple of bucks to Jamal Bowman. This is a key member of the squad. We've got to win this election. And it starts with you joining our efforts right here, right now. Text mass call to 30403. And to give you a preview of what's coming up next, we've also got to defend Cori Bush like our lives depend it, right? We've got to do it. We got to show up and support Black women in the ways that we say we value. You're going to be hearing more about that on the next mass call. But if you also have a little bit more time and a little bit more cash to share, I want you to throw down for Cori this week by texting mass call to 30403. We'll tell you there how you can find out what ways you can volunteer to support her getting over the threshold too. And finally, if you have found this mass call helpful in any way, and you think more people should be on the next one, do you think more people should be on the next mass call? I certainly would love to see them. If you agree and you've got some friends you might be able to bring with you, you think more people should come and get a part of this movement and grow it together, then you can make that happen, right? It's not just my responsibility. You can support me by helping get other folks on this call. In 2020, our biggest call drew 5,000 people from all over the country. Y'all didn't hear me because that's where you get excited. And what I said was that our biggest call in 2020 was 5,000 people at the same time, right? From all over the country, blue states, red states, purple states. We were all together. Leftists, progressives, more conservative comrades, all trying to figure out how we stopped a fascist authoritarian threat, right? Can you imagine that kind of unity on the daily? Well, I can, and I can imagine it being 10,000 next time. We're at the beginning of the process of building that same kind of momentum right now, and we started even earlier than we did in 2020, right? So if you want to help us get there, you've got to text mass call to 30403. It will plug you into the effort. We will plug your friends and comrades into the effort. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that WF Power and M4BL Action, again, are going to be throwing down in the Bronx soon. So if you are interested in throwing down with them because you live in New York, because you happen to be in New York, because you are interested in going to New York, I need you to text mass call to 30403 so we can tell you how to get down. I want to thank each and every single one of you. It's been a whole bunch of y'all. It's been a couple of hundred, almost 300 of y'all on the Zoom. It's been several hundred of y'all on the live streams. Can't believe it. This is what is inspiring me to believe that it is possible for us to get to a place where we can govern ourselves. And as we go back to our regularly scheduled programming for the rest of the evening, I want to remember what we talked about at the very beginning of this call. The challenges that we face are great and they are scary, but we have each other. And we have the knowledge that our ancestors and our elders in the struggle have also faced these kinds of challenges before, and they did not give up. We are the living evidence of it. They won in spite of the challenges, in spite of the roadblocks, in spite of the internalized stuff. Not because they had it easy, y'all. It was hard for them too, right? The difference between us and the right is that we have the audacity to believe that we can win too. And we can win centering love and hope and beloved community and not fear and hate. We will see you in the streets, comrades, and we will see you on the next call on June 26th. On whatever. We love you.